Big things are happening in AMSE and K25. We will officially announce on March 1st that operations of both museums will be overseen thereafter by the MSi Foundation, with continued support from our longtime partners at the Department of Energy. Starting on that day, every week in March, April, and May, we will highlight some of the initiatives being undertaken here, online, and behind the scenes at our museums. We're going to release all those details soon, but we wanted to get a jump on that announcement to allow us to start telling you about the amazing people who are part of our team and to help us celebrate Black History Month. Our museums and our exhibits and programs have helped tell the story of African Americans in the Manhattan Project and beyond. Our diverse board of directors brings to the table a tremendous combination of talent and experience. And as a key part of our transition to foundation operations, we have brought on board MSi Workforce Solutions, a minority-owned human resource and workforce development firm based in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and serving clients throughout the region. They're going to help with all elements of our human resources. So I want today to highlight some of these amazing folks I get to work with each and every day and to ask them to share their stories with you. Harold Connor and Sonia Johnson serve on the AMSE Foundation's Board of Directors, and Marty Lowe is President and CEO of MSi Workforce Solutions. So welcome everyone. Thank you for being part of this. And Harold, I want to start with you. Could you tell us both about your service in Oak Ridge over the years and your hopes for AMSE and K25 for the future?
Well, thank you, Alan. It's a pleasure to be here with you and today to talk about AMSE and also to talk about Black History Month, since we're celebrating that this month, and giving honor to God and from whom all blessings flow. I'd like to talk a little bit about my early career as a Black man in this life, and some of the situations that I have found myself involved in over these 5.5 decades of career. So I'd like to start out a little bit by talking about my early days in Martin, Tennessee. I grew up as this little Black boy in Northwest Tennessee with, believe it or not, a dad that was a science teacher and a principal, and a mom that was a first grade teacher. So imagine dealing with them at home and dealing with them at school. So that's basically what I dealt with in those early years growing up in Martin, Tennessee. And it was an all-Black situation. In fact, much of the things that I think about this morning are Black first by me in my career. But this little school, grades 1 through 12, had 175 people in it. I remember my graduating class had 9 people in it. And most people today have several hundred people in their graduating class. But the thing I remember the most, emphasizing Black history, all Black teachers, my mom and dad were 2 of them, so excellently qualified. Many of them went to historically Black colleges and universities. And we're talking about, I was born in 1946, and when I was in high school, I graduated in 1963. So you can think about those years and what the teachers went through as part of Black history to become in a position to teach those students, the community, the sports, and everything that was involved as a young Black man growing up in that small town. Obviously, I did finally graduate from high school and was lucky enough to enter the University of Tennessee Martin. That was kind of interesting since that school had not been integrated ever. And there was one Black girl that entered the year before me. She was in business, and I was the first Black guy in the School of Engineering. So that little school that I grew up in that had those all Black teachers prepared me well to enter the University of Tennessee. But kind of interesting that there I was and found myself in the school with many other students that did not look like me, obviously. And studying of course, I'm bald now, but I had a lot of hair in 1963. In fact, I had an afro with a full beard and everything. And believe it or not, the stress and strain from being that first Black engineering student took its toll, and my hair fell out, believe it or not. So it finally grew back, but just some of the situations, studying alone, not being involved, not integrated fully into the system. But one of the things I wanted to hallmark in my comments this morning is Black History Month is every month, and Black history includes white history and every other nationality. And all along the way, with the things I'll mention today, there were white folk, Black folk, brown folk, red folk involved in the career that I talk about, and many of the firsts that I was involved in. So those early college days were very interesting. Another first was the co-op program. It's a cooperative program between the University of Tennessee and a industrial entity. And I was lucky enough, and which brings me back to the Museum of Science and Energy, to work in the Oak Ridge community. So here's this little Black boy in 1964, after 1 year at the University of Tennessee Martin, coming into the Oak Ridge community to work at the Oak Ridge K-25 site, which the museum shares those responsibilities today, in the spring of '64. So here I come, mother and dad in tow, looking for a place to stay, finding that there weren't places to stay, not for me. And my mom and dad wanted me to stay with a Black family. So I ended up going to the Scarborough community, which now you've heard, many of you, about the Oak Ridge 85. I guess I was a part of that. I showed up in 1964, the Oak Ridge 85, and got the acknowledgement in 1955 of integrating the Oak Ridge school system. Once again, white folks and Black folks working together to accomplish a major undertaking, the first of its kind in the South and the Southeast by far. The following year, the Clinton 12, which gets a lot more publicity, happened. So I was on the heels of all that, coming in the spring of '64, working at the K-25 site, working alongside other men and women. Obviously, the technical division as a chemical engineer in training was where I worked, and obviously dealing with a lot of people that obviously did not look like me as a co-op student. But I want to say over and over again that those people worked with me, supported me, enabled me, prepared me for what I was dealing with, and I owe them a lot of respect and honor for what things happened in those early days in Oak Ridge. I had another good fortune along the way in those early days. I met some of the Oak Ridge 85 that we hear a lot about these days, the Graham family. Met this little girl named Joyce Graham and her big brothers named Lawrence Graham, who's featured in some of those Oak Ridge 85 presentations. Maisie Graham, who was her big sister. And I just thought, you know, I was staying in the community with another family and working at the K-25 site and knew the big brothers, knew the mom and dad. Little did I know that a few years later, I would be asking that young girl to become my wife. And it's 50 years later, and she's still hanging around for some reason. I can't imagine why. But a lot of great memories of those early days in Oak Ridge. Then I'd like to, shift a little bit. The University of Tennessee, after co-oping here in 1966, I was full-time at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And obviously, once again, you know, how many more Black chemical engineering students? Zero, other than me. Once again, studying alone, once again, being involved in activities. And once again, my advisor, Dr. John Prado, so a white man from the state of Mississippi, in 1966 at the University of Tennessee became my biggest advocate and enabled me to be successful in my career at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. So a lot of firsts, you know, obviously I got my bachelor's degree and ultimately my master's degree from the University of Tennessee. And once again, first Black chemical engineer to do both of those things. And then, you know, I'd like to underscore the early career in Oak Ridge, increasing job responsibilities. Once again, ultimately working my way through divisions, departments, and ultimately became the Oak Ridge K-25 site manager. And obviously the first time African-American had ascended to that position. And then ultimately the executive vice president of the Oak Ridge Environmental Management Program, which encompassed 5 sites, the 3 sites in the Oak Ridge area and the Portsmouth, Ohio site and the Paducah, Kentucky site. So this little Black boy that started out in Northwest Tennessee was now in charge of 5,000 or 6,000 people all around the Oak Ridge Environmental Management Program in those early days. Later in my career, after spending a lot of time in the uranium enrichment program and basically 33 years, when most people would say, well, that's about it, I think it's time to retire. Then the good Lord had some other plan for me, I guess, because I spent the next 21 years all around the Department of Energy complex. So 33 years in Oak Ridge, and then ending up in the Savannah Riverside in Aiken, South Carolina, the Idaho National Lab in Idaho Falls, the Livermore National Lab in Livermore, California, the Los Alamos National Lab in New Mexico. And I was all over the place for the next 20 plus years. And I'm thinking most people should be retired by now. And why am I still working? But the good Lord had other plans for me. And later, in my career, after working at many of those Department of Energy sites, I came back to the Oak Ridge site. Actually, it was about 6 years ago now. And Sonia, who's going to be talking later, she and I kind of knew each other in those early Oak Ridge days and later right now. And she's a wonderful member of our foundation now. But I came back to Oak Ridge, ended up working in the facilities that I had built years ago and had run those operations. Now I was part of the team to deactivate, decommission, demolish those same facilities that I built over those years. So kind of interesting. My career came full circle. Here I am back in the city, becoming a part of the environmental management program. And Sonia is a part of that. And we've worked together a lot and been so successful in the demolition of the Oak Ridge K-25 site. And now we have a history center there that Alan, you're in the director of, and I had a chance to be honored in part of that history center, and also honored in the Museum of Science and Energy where you're located right now. I have a laboratory named after me. So just awards and recognition and God's hands. And, so many people along the way that were part of all the accomplishments that I've had. So Black history and a bunch of firsts. Now, these days in semi-retirement, working at the University of Tennessee in their board of directors and 2 boards, alumni board, all the same people that were in charge of me as this young student. Now I'm on those board of advisors working with students today. So I've come full circle. I'm so grateful and it's so gratifying to work with students, and many awards, the Muddy Boot Award, one of the awards in that is exemplary for people that have worked in the Oak Ridge community. I won that award, and several chemical engineering awards as fellows, and so God's good. And I'd like to end by saying the museum is such a wonderful place. I've been connected with it for all these decades. And now we have a transition happening, where the museum can be run, the management and operations by us. And along with the partner of the Department of Energy, which has facilitated that museum all these decades. And it's an honor and a privilege. And I have some leadership principles that I think govern the way I act and behave, and challenging the status quo and inspiring a shared vision, enabling others to act, modeling the way, and encouraging the heart. So those are the things I think that make one successful in life. And I appreciate this opportunity and to help celebrate Black History Month.
Well, Harold, we appreciate you sharing that incredible story. We're proud to honor you here at AMSE and at the K-25 History Center. I've learned so much from you. In just under 2 years that I've been back here working at AMSE, and really honored to have you on the board and appreciate all you do for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sonia, I'm going to turn next to you. Sonia Johnson recently joined our board as our treasurer, and we're so glad to have you on the board. Could you tell us a bit, Sonia, about your career, what you do now, and your impressions thus far and hopes for AMSE and the K-25 History Center?
Okay. Thank you. And thanks for inviting me to be a part of this. It's such an honor. And I always love hearing Harold talk about his time in the Department of Energy complex. And I've been around for 35 years working around the complex in South Carolina, here twice, came back twice. I liked it so much. Called it Hanford and in New Mexico and on Yucca Mountain in Las Vegas. So I've been around and I've enjoyed my career. I've been in communications most of the time, spent a lot of time with public involvement, getting the public involved in some of the decisions that have led to where we are now with cleanup. And currently I work for UCOR, which is an Amentum-led partnership with Jacobs. And I am the manager of communications, community, workforce development, and diversity programs. And so in that role, getting to tell the story, which is kind of a full circle story. When I first came to Oak Ridge, we were just cleaning up. And as I said, making some of the decisions that have led to where we are now. And then I get to come back some 20 years later and see that, it was all successful. Reindustrialization of the site was successful. So it's been really fun embarking on this story from the 90s and then now. In terms of my involvement at AMSE, I could just tell you that I am thrilled to be a part of the board. It's only been 2 months. And one of the things that I look forward to is the continued development and growth of AMSE, as well as the K-25 History Museum. I think that watching those grow and seeing that there for the community to come out and learn about the history of this community, the Black history, the history of science, all that there is to learn. And it's a great resource for children. And, I know in living in all of the different areas of the complex, that was always important to me with my child, being able to take her in and learn about what I do. So I'm looking forward to helping us continue the mission that we have in front of us. And, in terms of diversity, I am thrilled to see the diversity of the board. We have different perspectives and diversity of thought and ideas, and seeing that work together along with Marty's organization. I think we're in for some good times. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that the Department of Energy and their support of the museum has been fabulous over the years, and I look forward to our continued partnership with them.
As do we, Sonia. We thank you so much for your service on the board. You're right. This is an amazing board. I'm excited to work with them each and every day. This museum has done so much over the years and has great potential to do more, especially, as you say, with children and the teaching of STEM and STEAM. That's a big part of what we do. So we're proud to do that here at AMSE and the K-25 History Center. So thank you. And now we'll turn to Marty Lowe. Marty, we very much appreciate the hard work that you and your colleagues at MSi Workforce Solutions are doing for us right now. It's been a real pleasure getting to know you and working with you. Could you tell us a bit about yourself, about MSi, and why you wanted to be part of this team?
Alan, Sonia, Dr. Connor, I really do appreciate the opportunity, as Sonia and Dr. Connors mentioned. Growing up in an area, as we discussed Black history, growing up in the Cleveland, Tennessee area, the Southeast Tennessee area, because of a lot of the work and plans that were laid either directly or indirectly with historical figures like Dr. Connor and many, many others. I've got a 92-year-old grandmother that literally grew up and had to see a lot of different things, and now still living, very healthy, to see where we've evolved. I've gotten a lot of perspective in my years, but growing up in this area, I was privileged to have wonderful teachers, wonderful coaches, a great family that taught me about the history of African Americans and other ethnicities, while also embracing the partnerships, white men, white women, teachers, educators, family, friends. And so for us, celebrating Black history, it is a daily thing. But I'm also glad that many of the challenges that Dr. Connor expressed earlier, I did not have to experience nearly as many of those. There's always going to be challenges, but it is wonderful to have people like Dr. Connor, to have been there to lay the foundation. Marty Lowe, raised in Southeast Tennessee. I thought I was going to go to school to become an engineer. While in school, starting that path, took a temporary assignment with a global battery manufacturer here in the region. Eventually turned into a 12-year career there. Met a girl. I'll make sure that I reference that. Dr. Connor referenced his lovely wife. Met a girl who was in the staffing, the recruiting, the human resource field. I found it fascinating. Had sort of grown up around it, and from that, we launched a couple of businesses many years ago, and that has evolved into MSi Workforce Solutions. We wanted to make sure that we provided the traditional staffing, recruiting, payroll, benefits, support for wonderful organizations like AMSE, but we also wanted to make sure that we had a vision of engaging, inspiring, and empowering, whether you were someone who was entering the workforce or someone who had was well established in your career, but looking for a change of pace. I'd be remiss if I did not at least mention how I came to know you, Alan, and some of the board members, Jim Campbell. It is because attending the Supplier Diversity Summit, I think it's 2018, the TVA Supplier Diversity Summit, I had the privilege of meeting a lot of great people, Tim Griffin, Paul Burkle, and was invited from that conference to a conference in Augusta, the Savannah River Remediation Conference. And so, Alan, during the lunch break, I'm sort of the guy that would go to the back of the room while the presentation is going on. I was sort of checking my phone and wanted to grab a little lunch. And this distinguished gentleman, he walks up and he says, "Hey, is anybody sitting at this table?" I said, No, please. And so from the time that this person sort of laid their things down and started to grab their lunch, all of a sudden this drove of people started to show up at this table. And all I kept hearing was, "Harold, are you back on the sideline? Harold, are you interested in work?" And I thought, well, who is this that I'm sitting with? And so the way and the honor that to be here serving and supporting the AMSE Foundation, K25 History Museum, it is because I met this gentleman, Dr. Harold Connor, at this event, and over time, he took time. He would answer my phone calls. He would answer my emails. And from that, we've progressed to MSi Workforce Solution, not only being able to do work with great companies like EPB and supporting TVA and others, but now we have the privilege of supporting the AMSE Foundation and the K25 Museum.
Well, I'm so glad that meeting happened, Marty. We appreciate all you're doing throughout this transition. Such great work, and thank you for being part of the team. And I want to close out today to ask all of you. You've talked about the great progress we made in this country toward racial equality, racial justice, but still there's work to be done. What more can we do to help with that progress, and what role can a museum play as we look to the future in racial equality and racial justice?
I guess I could start, Alan. That's a great question. I believe in lifelong learning, and I think the museum is a huge part of that. And I think young minds and can be influenced by recognizing what has happened in the past and dealing with the present, and have huge high hopes for the future. And so I think the lifelong learning involves listening. It involves being a part. It certainly involves diversity and inclusion. And as you've pointed out, we're not there yet. My dad, who lived to be 97 years old, would say, we ain't there yet. Mm-hmm. He was an educator and a principal, and as Sonia and Marty have pointed out, we've done some marvelous things, but there's so much more that can be done. So the museum can be integral in accomplishing that, the lifelong learning, which I believe in so much. And so we have an opportunity. It's right in front of us. We're in the right place at the right time. And I'm very hopeful and have the vision and utilizing the encouragement and the modeling that we've all done this morning and in our lives will demonstrate these are the things that as a people we need to do.
Yes. Marty and Sonia?
Well, one of my favorite sayings is to seek to understand. And I think that's what we have to do to continue our evolution of racial equality and diversity and inclusion. I think that oftentimes we tend to stick with our perspective and not seek to understand the other person's perspective. And I think that the museum can help with that by helping to reach out to folks and having various exhibits that encourage people to understand, to even host some seminars and things that get people talking. So I think if we could help folks to understand the other perspective or the various perspectives, that will be a lot further along.
And I will say, in terms of programs and exhibits, we can do more. Before the shutdown due to the pandemic, we had mounted an exhibit called Secret Growth, all about the history of African Americans in the Manhattan Project here in Oak Ridge. And specifically, sadly, COVID kept that exhibit closed, but we've maintained it. It's going to become a traveling exhibit. We'll show it at the K-25 History Center, hopefully do some programming around that. So we want to continue talking about those themes. And I'm sorry, Marty, I interrupted you. Please.
Not at all, Alan. I agree. What a great question. A couple things that I would say. I think this opportunity expresses to young men and young women of all ethnicities that being intentional, from a simple hello to a stranger, to being intentional with remembering historic contributions as a museum. I think this shows and provides a great example to many who may never pursue opportunities and or STEM or STEAM career paths. I also think the mantra of getting comfortable by being uncomfortable, whether that's engaging your neighbor or those in your workplace, I think there's a lot to learn by actually being intentional with those that we may not feel as comfortable around. So once again, a great question, and I really do appreciate the opportunity today.
One of the things I wanted to point out, Alan, is we're so happy to have you
yes,
as our director of the Museum of Science and Energy. I mean, you have worked in presidential libraries, the Baker Center, the Lincoln Library, and all the many experiences that you have are brought to bear on our museum. And looking forward, I think we couldn't be any better equipped. We have diversity as shown by Sonia and Marty and me and others in the community, TVA and the universities, advisory committees. And so we're well positioned to be extremely successful.
Well, thank you, Harold. That does my heart good. Thank you so much for that. I'm pleased and honored to be here each and every day directing AMSE in the K-25 History Center and working with great folks like all of you. I really appreciate you being part of this today. Thanks for joining us to celebrate AMSE in the K-25 History Center and Black History Month. Thanks all of you for watching and for your support of our museums. And thank you again, panelists, for being here. We appreciate it.
Welcome. Enjoy.
Take care.